The story begins at the steps of Sacré-Cœur, exactly where Chapter 4 left off, the great white domes rising behind them against a sky still holding onto the last gray light of early morning. John and Cain stand facing each other on the stone plaza, both men worn down to almost nothing by a night that's already cost them more than either can afford. The city of Paris spreads out silent and empty beneath them, the streets still holding the aftermath of everything that came before this moment. The duel unfolds almost exactly the way it always has, the way it was always going to. The first shot cracks out across the empty square. The second follows a beat later. Then a pause, both men wounded now, both men still somehow standing through nothing but sheer stubbornness and the refusal to be the one who goes down first. Then the third round begins, and Cain, blind and moving purely on instinct honed over decades of exactly this kind of work, finally lands the shot that matters. John falls. The Marquis steps forward from where he's been watching at a safe distance, an expression of quiet satisfaction settling over his face, the look of a man who has just gotten exactly what he spent months orchestrating. He believes the duel is finished. He believes John Wick is finally, permanently off the board after years of costing him everything he's tried to build. He glances toward Cain, already halfway into a word of congratulations. Then something makes him pause mid-step. John hasn't actually fired his final shot yet. John reaches slowly for his weapon on the cold stone, every inch of the motion costing him far more than it should, his hand trembling with the effort of it. The Marquis assumes it doesn't matter anymore, assumes the man bleeding out in front of him is too far gone to be any kind of threat at all. He's wrong. John fires. The shot finds him cleanly, and the Marquis drops where he stands without another word. For a long moment, nobody on that plaza moves at all, the silence stretching out over the whole square. Cain understands immediately what's happened, even without being able to see it. John has technically, by the exact rules both men have lived and nearly died by their entire lives, won the duel. The Harbinger, standing off to the side carrying the full weight of the high table behind every syllable, announces it plainly into the silence. The duel is concluded. But John collapses a second later onto the stone, and to everyone watching from a distance, the wounds look unmistakably, completely fatal. This is where the story breaks away from everything audiences already know. Winston arranges a full funeral for John, quiet and formal, exactly the kind of send-off the underworld reserves for one of its own when it actually respects what someone gave to earn it. A gravestone is carved and set into the ground beneath a bare tree, simple and unadorned. Jonathan Wick. 1964 to 2023. Cain attends, standing near the back of the small gathering, saying nothing to anyone, his blind eyes fixed somewhere past the grave itself. Akira watches from a careful distance across the cemetery, close enough to pay her respects to a man who once meant something to her world, far enough to avoid drawing attention from anyone who might be watching who attends. Nobody standing in that cemetery knows the truth of what actually happened on those steps. Even the high table itself, in the days that follow, quietly comes to accept that John Wick is finally, genuinely, permanently dead. Winston delivers the final words over the grave himself, his voice steady in the way it always is in public, carrying the same measured composure that's carried him through decades of exactly this kind of loss. But something about the moment feels slightly off if you're watching closely enough, a beat that lingers a fraction too long, a look that settles a little too carefully on the freshly turned earth in front of him. He looks down at the headstone one last time before turning to leave the small crowd behind him. "Goodbye, Jonathan," he says quietly, almost too quiet for anyone standing nearby to catch over the wind moving through the bare branches above them. Then he turns and walks away without looking back even once. That night, the cemetery sits completely empty under a steady, cold rain. Then, without warning, a hand breaks through the loosened earth near the fresh grave. John wakes up, gasping, badly injured, barely able to move his own limbs. But he's alive. Someone got to him before the burial ever became final, someone who quietly arranged all of this, who helped him disappear from the world at the exact moment the world was ready to believe he'd left it. We don't learn who yet. John looks down at his own shaking hands in the rain, still trying to process the fact that he's still breathing at all. And slowly, underneath the pain, something else settles in alongside it. The entire world, every assassin, every high table representative, every enemy he's ever made, now believes John Wick is dead. For the first time in years, genuinely for the first time since Helen died and dragged him back into this life, John has something he hasn't had in a very long time. An advantage. He could simply disappear now. Find somewhere far away from all of it, live quietly, never pick up a weapon again for the rest of whatever life he has left. But the thought doesn't hold for long. He thinks of Helen. He thinks of the dog that started all of this. He thinks of the Marquis already dead, and realizes with a cold certainty that killing him changed almost nothing at all. Someone else will simply step into that same chair, inherit the same power, and the same machine will keep grinding forward exactly the way it always has. So John makes a decision, lying there in the rain, more injured than he's been in years. He isn't going to run from the high table anymore. He's going to tear apart the entire system that built it in the first place. In the weeks that follow, John begins investigating quietly from the shadows, moving through a world that no longer recognizes him because it believes he's already gone. What he finds unsettles even him. The Marquis, for all his power and cruelty, was never actually the true authority behind the high table. He was only ever a representative, a face put forward while someone else made the real decisions from somewhere further back. Someone who knew in advance exactly how John's duel with Cain would play out. Someone who knew Winston would step in to help him. Someone who may have known before it even happened that John would survive. Digging through an old high table document he manages to get his hands on, John finds something at the bottom of the page he's never seen before in all his years inside this world. A black circle containing 12 small marks arranged around its edge. He stares at it for a long time in the dim light, turning the page slowly, trying to place it against everything he thought he understood about how this organization actually worked. "Who are you?" he says quietly to no one in the room. John walks through an unfamiliar city sometime later, dressed in plain, ordinary clothes that draw no attention at all, no tailored suit, no weapon visible anywhere on him, nothing left of the man the world thinks it buried. Nobody on the crowded street gives him a second look as he passes. He steps down a narrow flight of stairs into a small underground bar tucked below street level, the kind of place that doesn't advertise itself to anyone who isn't already looking for it, tucked away behind an unmarked door most people would walk right past. The bartender glances up as he approaches the counter, and for a brief moment genuine surprise flickers across his face before he manages to school it back into something carefully neutral. "I thought you were dead," he says quietly, setting down the glass he'd been polishing. "That's the idea," John answers. The bartender reaches beneath the counter and slides a thin file across the worn wood without another word passing between them. John opens it slowly, one page at a time. Inside are photographs. Winston, composed as always even in a candid shot. Cain, captured from a distance. Akira, mid-motion in what looks like a security still. The Harbinger, standing exactly where authority always seems to stand. The Marquis, already gone but still catalogued alongside the rest like nothing had changed. Several unfamiliar faces John doesn't immediately recognize, presumably other high table members operating somewhere well above the level he ever dealt with directly in all his years inside this world. And one final photograph, tucked at the very back of the file behind all the others. A man John has never seen before in his life. John looks down at it for a long moment, rain still clinging to the shoulders of his coat, the city humming quietly outside the bar's heavy closed door, somewhere far above the two of them standing in that dim, narrow room.